You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
Thanks for listening in on another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. I'm super excited. Today I'm honored to have a good friend and dear friend of mine from New York coming in to have this amazing podcast series. She is an aesthetic consultant and patient safety advocate. And today's session is called Attention Seekers. So you're going to have to tune in to find out what all that means. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. So what we're doing is we're honored here to have a good friend of mine from New York, Melinda. She is an aesthetic consultant and patient safety advocate. I always get that messed up. And she's here all the way from New York to have a serious conversation about, plastic surgery and about all the things that we think are relevant and important for our listeners to hear and pay attention to. The title of our session today is Attention Seekers. So let's start out with introducing you. You get to say hi and tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, Roddy. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here because he's such an exceptional surgeon. So I like to surround myself with the best. He's one of the best. I am a patient safety advocate. I have been in the industry for 28 years.
28. So you started when you were 3.
I started when I was 3. That's exactly right. I'm a child prodigy. But no, the company has been around for 20 years now. I started the company when I was 21, and I started working with surgeons when I was a teenager. So I was kind of born into this industry and mentored by all of the most esteemed and respected surgeons in the industry.
Awesome. Well, we're super excited to have you because I think everybody who listens knows my perspective on things. I tend to be a little bit direct, and I think that I love plastic surgery. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here on a weekend having this podcast. But I think we are in a little bit of a dangerous time in society in that while plastic surgery is amazing, there's a lot of pitfalls. And so the purpose of the podcast is constantly to educate people. And I think you're going to be an amazing co-host to go over this topic. So let's just dive in right away. We call this attention seekers. So what is your thought? What do you mean because we came up with the idea together? What does attention seekers mean to you?
The attention seeker. So everybody is looking for likes and looking for attention via social media. We're very much in a influencer society, and this is the culture that Instagram and Facebook and social media outlets has created. So it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Everyone has a voice now. So it's the attention seekers is more having to do with what are people doing and what measures are they going to seek that attention and try to seek acceptance from people or admirers.
So what it comes down to is social media again. And so we've talked about this on several other episodes, and you can never talk about this enough. And it's going to constantly keep coming up because it's not going away. It's growing, and it's arguably getting out of control. And so the reality is that when it comes to plastic surgery, the reason why attention seekers are dangerous is that, you're with all these images that you're constantly being spewed on your social media. People are starting to gauge themselves, judge themselves. Young people are trying to figure out if they look attractive or not. And so where the danger comes is these people who are so-called influencers, in order to get likes and attention, they keep pushing the envelope. And you see that in so many ways, and people are starting to morph. I'm going to be doing an episode with Access Hollywood regarding this, which is the sort of the morphing of all people starting to look the same, the Instagram face.
Right.
And so these people are getting attention, some of it by doing things and some of it by fake, photo morphing, et cetera. But there's definitely a lot of plastic surgery related changes that people are going through in order to get attention.
Absolutely. And not just going through themselves, but things that they're posting to gain that attention. So, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I see a lot of things that I'm just like, how could someone post something like this? Like this is a very desperate post. Or some of the newer procedures that you see, like these like extreme threading or, they're just doing it for shock value. And I'm seeing a lot of that as far as when I say attention seekers, like the shock value of what I'm going to post is going to like bring 100 new followers to my page. and
Right.
that is not always a healthy thing to put out there. So I don't think people are really putting a lot of thought into what they're actually posting and the impression that's going to leave on maybe, the younger layman who's watching, or, someone who is just extremely insecure, who's like, oh my God, this looks amazing. Let me run and go do this. Like, they're not really educating their following. They're just posting things for shock value.
Right. So we have two people that do this, and one of them is the actual influencer themselves, which we'll get into in a minute. But I think where the real problem, I take that back. I think where one of the other major problems is in the area of the physicians or the clinicians or the providers, whether that be a nurse injector, et cetera. And so we talked about this earlier, about this constant, hey guys, I'm so lucky to be here with Susie at so-and-so, who's a porn star, and she came in for her lips. And so the question you and I were talking about is like, who cares? Why are you putting so-and-so posting an image, a shout out from her? And the reason you're doing that is because you want to say that so-and-so is coming to me, look at me, look at me. Right?
Or I know you want to look like this person, so I'm the one taking care of her. Look at me, look at me.
Correct. And so there's so many things wrong with that, right? Number one is, who cares that so-and-so is there? Because forget about the fact that you may look at her and be like, wow, she looks terrible. Let's take about the person who looks at her and says, wow, she looks beautiful. So the truth of the matter is that, you this doctor or this provider, because the reality is today no longer people doing procedures are all doctors, right? We're going to have a whole section on that as well, about nurse injectors and PAs and doctors and different kinds of doctors. But they're posting these images of so-called celebrities, which today is a loose term, right? Influencers considered a celebrity for craziness, and they're posting these things, and they're doing it purely as a marketing ploy or attention to draw in people so that they can increase their bottom line.
Right. Exactly. It's misleading. Also, what is misleading is I do know a lot of certain celebrities who have gone to one surgeon who might be sharing an office with someone else, but that someone else took a photo with that celebrity and posted it. And they're like, oh, hey, look who my client is. And I'm like, no, she's not. That happens too.
Yeah. And then the thing why it's all dangerous and convoluted is because we all know that those influencers are getting almost always, and I can say this with certainty, they're getting compensated.
For sure.
So Instagram's now trying to fix that and saying, oh, if you get compensated, then you need to put it out there. But we both know that there's no one policing it. So you're out there, you're a young girl, and you're like, God, my lips look so small. When in reality, you have beautiful lips, but they're small relative to all the ducks that are walking around. And then you go on there and you're like, oh my God, I love Selena Gomez. And Selena Gomez is at Dr. Shmuley's office. And Selena Gomez went in there. By the way, Selena Gomez is just a random celebrity, but I'm talking about. And then all of a sudden you see her on Instagram. She's at Dr. Shmuley's and she got it for free. And all of a sudden, boom, there you are at Dr. Shmuley's, right? And he's not even trained and you never did any real homework. And next thing you know, you have an infection in your lip.
Well, yeah, That's exactly right. And we see this all the time. It's like almost as if the influencers are the experts, and that shouldn't be, because most of these young girls have no idea, anything about medical aesthetics or the medical industry, and it's not a one-size-fits-all specialty, this medical aesthetics, the plastic surgery industry. So it's really scary, what's out there right now, and it's concerning. And when I see stuff like this, it's very alarming for me, because when I sit and I talk to my clients every single day in and day out, they're constantly bringing up these young girls or trendy girls or influencers, quote unquote. I saw this one doing that. I need to do this too. And I'm like, you absolutely do not, because every individual is unique and you need a unique treatment plan for yourself. So don't just look at what so-and-so is doing and try to do that. It might not work for you, and this is why, or here are the repercussions of this treatment and why you should not do it. And here is what's going to happen long-term with this treatment and why you should not do it. Or, yeah, maybe that is a good treatment for yourself, but I would say, that person who she was with, he's not a board-certified surgeon. He's not a board-certified anything, even though he calls himself a plastic surgeon or a dermatologist. But, look him up. This is how you research the doctor.
Right.
Look into it. Know how to do your research about these people and understand what the motivation behind that post or that influencer representing that surgeon, understand what that motivation was.
I think that that's the reality is that you just need to understand that when someone is giving you information, you have to figure out the value of that information and whether or not it's authentic, if it's accurate, if it's biased. So, the problem now is that you're getting this information and you just assume that these, by the way, the concept of influencer is just it's insanity. Historically, if you were influencing somebody, it's because you had some credibility, right? If a scientist said something like climate change, he's influencing you because he has done research. If you go and see an amazing famous photographer and he's telling you that the lighting is poor, it's because he has experience. But if you're some fashionista, that means you have money and you buy a bunch of fashion and you post your images every day. That makes you a world-renowned expert in everything.
Correct.
And that's insane. There's no credibility to these people.
There is no credibility, but there's a lot of psychology behind this and this type of behavior. And I think the motivation is, preying on the vulnerable patient, preying on people's insecurities. And there's a lot of that going around. A lot of people feeling really down about themselves, feeling really insecure, feeling really vulnerable. So these people who are beautiful, it kind of gives them a little bit of hope. So they think, this is what I need to do too.
Sure. And that's not, listen, human psychology has been from the beginning of time. You and I talked about this. It isn't so much that, someone who is necessarily doesn't feel super confident, he's a beautiful, powerful, successful, happy person, isn't going to feel bad about themselves. That's happened since the beginning of time. The issue is that the people who are portraying themselves as beautiful, blah, 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 aren't. Half their images aren't themselves. I mean, celebrities, there's thousands of sites now where they put them side by side and know they're not them. Secondly, those people aren't happy. They're actually miserable. Third of all, so it's like you're comparing yourself to a non-existing, like it's a hologram. And, the reality is that now you're getting those images every 15 seconds, as opposed to before you would go to a party once a month and see that pretty girl with her husband and be like, oh, I feel terrible about my life. Now you're getting it every 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's constantly in your face.
So it's, and the last thing we're going to take a quick break here and then we'll come back. But I wanted to talk about this concept where basically everyone sort of looks the same, right? And everyone's like, how is that possible? How does everyone look the same? And they're going to all different people, getting all different things. So we'll tune in at the break and we'll figure out why everyone looks the same.
You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.
All right, we're back with Plastic Surgery Uncensored with my dear friend Melinda. And we were just, before the break, we were talking about this idea or this notion that somehow, despite the fact there's millions of people out there on social media, they all look the same, right? There's this so-called Instagram face, which is becoming this common theme. And so they asked me to talk about this on another program. And I said, well, okay, listen, at the end of the day, what you start out as, you are Asian, you're African-American, you're Middle Eastern, and you all have your own features, okay? But then if every single sub-unit of your face is pushed to a specific endpoint, then at the end, the sum total of all those units start to look the same. So let's go from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Wrinkles in your forehead, they're all going to be gone with Botox. Check. Eyebrows, they need to be arched. They need to be in the last third of your eyebrow needs to be high pitched. So that means either you pencil it in, you tattoo it, or you do like Bella Hadid, you do a little brow lift. Check. Upper eyelids, you need to have eyelid show so you can put on makeup. So if you're born with a little excess eyelid skin, you get a little blepharoplasty. Lower eyelids, no wrinkles, no crease, no hollow, no fat. So you just fill that in with a little bit of filler. Cheeks, you need to have both front projection or anterior projection, and most notably, high cheekbones. That's easiest thing to do now. You walk in, you put in a couple fillers, all of a sudden you got these sort of vixen high arched cheekbones. Nose, everyone on Instagram has, whether it's true, if it's penciled, if it's photoshopped, have a narrow bridge, pointy little tip, nostrils are pinched, scoop nose, rotated tip. Lips, pretty much everyone's lips are ginormous, right? And then jaw the angle, basically your where your masseters are. You put in filler, add to your chin, and blow out your marionette lines, right? Then you put on your fake lashes, you put on your extensions, and bam, everyone looks the same, right?
There you are. Yes, it's a problem. I recently had put up an animated illustration on Instagram of, this ordinary looking cartoon woman. And like, her actually having her eyebrows microbladed and then putting on the wig so that her hair is nice and like flowy and dark and long and silky and beautiful, and the breast implants being put in because her breasts were too small, or the waist wasn't good enough, so you make the waist smaller and then the hips bigger and then the butt bigger. But they were going through how this cartoon, this animation, transformed into the clone that everybody sees on Instagram. And I think it was just so relatable for so many people, because they sit and they pick apart their face. So do you think my cheek needs a little bit more volume, Melinda? And I'm like, no, your cheek is fine. Your cheek is beautiful. Or, what about this little area? I'm like, we have tear troughs. I have like very deep tear troughs. I was like, we have tear troughs for a reason, and noses give us character. But if there's something that really is like throwing off the balance of your face, then yes, and I think a lot of this stems from, the golden ratio and balancing the thirds of our face. But it's gone to extremes now, and everyone's, trying to achieve this one specific look.
Correct. I think listen, I'm a plastic surgeon. I make a living doing plastic surgery. I love plastic surgery, and I'm enamored with transformations of making people more balanced and feel more attractive. So by no means do I think any of these things shouldn't be done, but I always make the analogy, which is the equivalence of to a chef and a recipe. So if you eat some food and the food is incredibly salty, the issue isn't the salt, the issue is the chef. So the problem is that there's too many chefs in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. None of them are well trained, and they're all overdoing the ingredients.
They are.
So at the end of the day, the net outcome is that people are starting to look the same. And when you see tons and tons and tons of images all looking the same, you start to begin to feel like that's the image you must look like.
That's right. And I think now it's kind of turning around, and people want more of that individuality, but it still is a huge problem. And when I work with surgeons, I really look for the surgeons who appreciate individual aesthetic and really want everyone to look individually unique and not like a clone of one another. And it's interesting because in different demographics you see different trends, and I think like the coast you tend to see a little bit more of it. LA, Texas, New York, Miami. You see a lot of this. So a lot of these women are just so focused on this hyper aesthetic, and the hyper aesthetic patient is, now this is what we're coining, that type of a patient, the hyper aesthetic patient who feels like they have to achieve this type of look. And it's a big issue right now.
Well, I think the key is what we're doing today, which is we got to just keep talking about it and keep talking about it and keep talking about it. And like all things, pendulums swing. And so hopefully eventually, by listening to these segments, patients who are on that track kind of have a moment and a reflection and say, hey, I think I can see myself starting to spiral a little bit. So at any rate, I think it's a very, very important topic. And the take-home message is be careful of the attention seekers, and don't be influenced by the influencers.
Don't be influenced by the influencers. Be influenced by the smart medical professionals.
Yes, indeed. Well, it was a pleasure having you.
Thank
you so much. Again, thank you for listening and tuning in to Plastic Surgery Uncensored. Remember, tell all your friends about it, subscribe, share, and we look forward to hearing you at the next one.
We would love to get your feedback. If you enjoyed and found our podcast helpful, tell us why. Give us a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or you can go directly to revolverpodcast.com. If you have a topic you would like us to talk about, then please reach out to us on Facebook, Roddy Raban, Instagram at Dr. Roddy Raban, or RoddyRaban.com. You are listening to Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban on Revolver Podcast.